Hello, welcome to PodRocket. I'm Kate, the producer of PodRocket. With me today is Noel, our engineer at LogRocket. Hi, Noel. How's it going?
Good.
Thanks for joining us again. And also our guest today is Alex Lichter. How's it going, Alex?
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm feeling great. How about you?
Thanks for joining us. So Alex is the founder of development and also the core Nuxt, or the Nuxt core maintainer, excuse me. Just to start, can you tell us about what is development and maybe just kind of your role as a maintainer of Nuxt?
Sure. Development is a company me and a couple of friends at first funded back when we passed our A-levels, and now we're in two of us. But what I'm mainly doing there is doing consultancy, basically everything about web development with a focus, of course, on like front-end, Vue, and Nuxt. So that fits. But also we're doing basically full-stack stuff, and whatever help is needed, we'll jump in. And about Nuxt, the role as a core maintainer, I think we'll go into that a bit later. I think it would start first with explaining what Nuxt is actually for everybody not knowing about it. So Nuxt is a web framework, of course, so fully front-end oriented, but it is a meta framework based on Vue.js. So, I mean, Vue is probably known to most of you, and Nuxt sitting on top of that. And the idea is to make developers' life easier and to make especially also developing full-fledged applications a breeze. Yeah, I think that sums it up.
Yeah, perfect. So what is your kind of role in the Nuxt ecosystem as a core maintainer? Were you pretty early on? Did you kind of join later? Like, what does that look like?
So I joined as, I think, the fifth person in team. That was back in 2018, I think, if I remember correctly. So quite some years ago. And yeah, back then we were like from 4 people to 6 then. So Jonas, who is not part of the team anymore, joined with me back then. And it was pretty wild because there was like no company behind it, because now there is a company because the Chopin brothers who founded Nuxt also founded a company and got VC money. So went through a seed run, which is pretty awesome. And yeah, back then, basically what happened is that I was like starting with Laravel and then came to Vue because Vue is the default preset for Laravel. And I really liked the idea of like Vue, just using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to like get in not that much like theory and technical stuff and not the need of TypeScript. So that was pretty cool. The learning curve was I think optimal, and the docs were very good. So I started with it and I worked on some client projects. And then I realized, SEO is necessary. Like you want to have like all the meta tags when sharing stuff, and by default, single page applications aren't that good when it comes to SEO. So I thought there might be a solution for that, and the answer was back then Nuxt. So yeah, I found out about it. I was all in. I used it, and then I realized that there were a few things that were necessary for one of our projects. For example, like adding RSS feeds. And they weren't part of Nuxt back then. So I thought there might be a module for that, which is, basically just a pluggable, module for Nuxt, so the core isn't going and growing and going that big. But there wasn't. So I thought, okay, I will just develop one. And, I know that there is open source, and thanks to Laravel, to the Laravel community also, was kind of into it already. So I thought, if I have to write it and to make it work for my project, I could also open source it to reduce the workload for others, so others can use it as well and maybe work on it too, because they may need, another format or something, or have other suggestions. So yeah, that was basically the idea, and I got in touch also with the people back then from the core team. So of course the Chopin brothers and also Puya and Clark. So these were the 4 people back then in the core team. So yeah, we were discussing a few things here and there, and then I took a look into the core as well, like going through all the code, because if you've ever looked at the project, at first it's like, wow, it's a bit overwhelming, like with every large new project, but with tiny baby steps you get into it. So yeah, I started contributing more and more, and then it was around summer, and I was on my way to Dublin, actually, to Ireland, starting an internship there. And then Sebastian was like, yeah, look, there is a Vue conference in London. Would you like to join us? I was like, yeah, sure. Why not? And they said, yeah, okay, then just book flights and a hotel and we will cover the ticket for you. So we're like, wow, amazing. Yeah, I'll definitely not let that opportunity go. So then I went there, and this was the conference where actually Nuxt 2 was live released. And then I first time like met people from the core team. So basically the two Chopin brothers, and we had a blast. And they said, yeah, congrats, thanks for being here, and you're on the core team now.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so that's like the history.
Yeah, no, it's a very cool story. Yeah, like, did you ever kind of, I guess, were you aspiring to ever become like an open source contributor at this level, or did you just kind of stumble into it? Like,
I think I kind of stumbled into it. So it was never like a goal, and I never thought that it was maybe happening. But I was like, I was trying to bring that project forward. So because I really enjoyed working with it, and I thought making it even better, without like having lots of overhead, because most of the things I've added, like most of the modules I wrote were also there because I also had to write them anyway for projects. And at some point it wasn't not only that anymore, but also, okay, this could be a great addition, maybe not for the project, but in general. So it kind of, I felt that passion for the project, and yeah, this is how it basically started.
Nice. Yeah, that's a super cool story. I feel like that's kind of a common thread is like of open source maintainers, that they, people, it's always a dream. Many people have to like spend a lot of time working on open source and have it like, be their main professional focus, but it's hard to get to. And I feel like the common thread we keep hearing is just like, I don't know, I just started working on stuff and kept contributing code, and eventually something stuck, and like now I'm doing it. So I feel like this is another like perfect exemplary case of that.
Absolutely. Especially like, in my opinion, you have to be passionate about it. And yeah, that's almost it. Like if you continuously contribute, and it doesn't even have to be only code. Like if you contribute with like documentation or explaining things, this is also very important. Or also triaging issues, like what I'm doing mainly at the moment, besides like giving workshops and talks and stuff, or like videos, like producing videos, is actually really like talking to people in the Discord, like understanding their problems, and kind of also try to understand what pain points the community sees. And then it's quite easy to say like, okay, maybe we need to improve documentation. Maybe we need a more in-depth blog post. Okay, then I write one. Or maybe we need a new function or a new feature. So yeah, also like having an ear in the community is very important for that too.
Nice. Yeah, very cool. I could talk like open source maintenance and community building and stuff all day. But maybe to reel us back a bit, can we frame a bit more about like why someone might care about Nuxt and like what a meta framework does?
Absolutely, yeah. So first thing I always try to bring to the people is like, you could use plain Vue. Nothing is wrong about that. And if you start like learning one of the main frameworks, then like, or start learning Vue, it's totally fine to not like jump into Nuxt right away. But if you want to like develop an application and you want to be quick in terms of like not having to configure all the things or just getting sensible defaults out of the box, then Nuxt is a great choice. Like you have a very quick time to market. You can just start with your application. You have one command to build things. And another big plus is that Nuxt is very versatile in terms of you can build SPAs, but if you want, you can enable server-side rendering, either like on demand with a node server, but also with static site generation with like just config flag. So that's pretty cool. And it also enables you to not having to think about it before starting your application, but just build it, try it out, and then iterating over it more and more.
Yeah. So what is the difference, I guess for devs that are unfamiliar, on a Nuxt in static site generator mode versus default mode? Or is there a difference?
Yeah, there is. So I think by default I think you can choose when you create a Nuxt application, but generally you have just server-side rendering enabled, and that means Nuxt would run with like a Node.js server running, and whenever so at first you need the server all the time, and whenever someone is hitting your page, then the first request, say the person comes from Google or the user is like hard reloading, this will hit the node server, and the node server will take that page and render the HTML. So that's like the basic of dynamic server-side rendering. But if you have, let's say, a blog, then you don't need the same content be rendered over and over again. what you want is static site generation, which basically means whenever you change, like you edit or update or create a blog post, then just regenerate the site. And then they're just like plain HTML files, and the user doesn't have to hit a server, doesn't have to be a server anymore. They just get the HTML file, and then after they like see the content, they will download, of course, also Vue and Nuxt, so slightly overhead. And from that point on, where like Vue takes over, it just works like an SPA again.
Gotcha. So like say maybe run with your example, a user has a blog, but then they have like a login system with user details and stuff that get loaded over the wire. How does that kind of setup work?
So that would basically mean like you can exclude pages from being generated. So you can say, okay, everything like prefixed with admin, for example, you don't generate that beforehand. This is actually what I'm doing with my blog as well, which is of course also powered by Nuxt. So I have an admin page there, and I just say, okay, if admin is part of the route, then just don't generate it and ignore that, and this will just work with like a traditional SPA then.
Gotcha. Very cool. How about for like specific parts of a like I'm trying to think of another example on a blog. Like say there's a comment section in the blog that may be more dynamic. Like how do you set that up?
So then the common way would be either to like load it after the page had been sent to the user, so like load it afterwards, which also kind of makes sense because usually comments are below the post, so you don't need them in advance. And there are also other ways, like having the option to do something like stale revalidate. So, but that's not possible with Nuxt 2, but will come in Nuxt 3. So that's currently in the making to also enable that.
Nice. Yeah. I want to talk about Nuxt 3 a little bit. But before we get there, I kind of want to, like walk this path a little more. So say there, like you said, if you're getting into Vue and you don't see the need for Nuxt, it's like just start with Vue and take one step at a time. But say you are like you have a large existing Vue project and you're starting to kind of feel the need for something like Nuxt. How would you recommend people kind of go and explore and maybe start trying like to convert or introduce Nuxt to an existing project?
Yeah, you already said the right word. Like converting is the thing there, because the main problem is that you can't just like add Nuxt to an existing Vue project because of the nature of that framework on top of Vue. So what you can do, of course, is just spin up a new Nuxt project and then basically just carry everything over. And of course, Nuxt has a very specific folder structure, but it's not that different from what you would usually have in a classic Vue application. Maybe views is called pages. And of course, maybe you have to adapt the pages then, because Nuxt is using something called file system based routing, which means if you have, say you have an about.vue file in the pages folder, then it's equivalent to /about. Or if you have an about folder and then say a team.vue, then it's equivalent to /about/team. So this is something you might have to adjust. And a few things as well, like you've configured things in your Vue application, or like you've added Vue router, you don't need it anymore. You like have added Vuex. It's also all out of the box with Nuxt. So you have to tweak a few things here and there, but you can get started easily. And I personally would suggest to like try carrying everything over and just keeping it with not server-side rendered. So just keep it as a plain old SPA for now. And as soon as you migrated everything, then you can, if you need that, like switch on server-side rendering and then see if something breaks, what's going on. But yeah, like migration is always a big topic. And I personally always love to hear stories about people migrating from plain Vue to Nuxt, because I'm very curious how everything works, what's smooth and what hiccups or what problems are there. Because that is always interesting to know, also in terms of like giving a better developer experience and improving things.
Nice. Yeah, very cool. So I guess when we're talking about it in the context of the benefits of Nuxt, we touched a little bit on like SEO helping, when we get away from these large single page apps, and just performance in general. Can you speak a little bit more to how having Nuxt kind of in the stack helps with those two problems? Yeah.
So with server-side rendering or static site generation, as SEO is almost granted by default, due to like having the HTML that doesn't have to be generated by the JavaScript. So at first, like search engine crawlers can just easily parse it. I mean, Google knows JavaScript now as well, but it's quicker. They see it directly. So this is almost given there out of the box. And you can use something called Vue Meta, which is also provided by Nuxt. to like alter meta tags, to add, for example, also structured data, and will be all reflected directly in that HTML. So that's pretty cool. And performance-wise, I think the most important part is that whenever the user really gets the HTML from the server or from the static file, they can already see the page. The downside is it's not interactive yet, but at least they can, for example, read a blog post. So the perceived performance is way better compared to an SPA, where you at first like get that loading spinner because the JavaScript has to, of course, first being parsed and then like create the HTML. So I think that's the main improvement here. And also like with caching API responses from the server side, for example, say you have like a larger e-commerce solution, you can even get way better like really performance metrics and KPIs.
Yeah, gotcha. Nice. I think that kind of leads nicely into my next question. So you brought up, like, say you have a large shop with a bunch of products or something, like something in e-commerce. I think maybe devs that aren't familiar kind of with this paradigm of like having the server like query data and then build pages and kind of expose it, like I think they might get a little bit lost there. Can you explain how these frameworks that do data fetching server side and then render pages, like how those work, like what that paradigm looks like?
Yeah, so in Nuxt, basically you have a method called fetch. Not to the naming is a bit confusing, but it's part of every Vue component, and it's not related to the fetch API. So that's a bit important. So and in this fetch method, you can basically it can be async, and you can get any data you want, and you can use any fetching library you want. But you can get data there, and by default, this fetch function will be executed on the server side if the page is server rendered, or on the client side if you like navigate from page A to page B. Then B's fetch function will be executed. And if this happens on the server, of course, the node server will then query the API. It will then transform like all the component hierarchy into a string, HTML string actually, and it will then also add the results from every fetch call inside the HTML as like state. So we have, in the end, say, a big JSON object with the response. And then if this will be sent to the user, the JavaScript on the user side will take over that state to synchronize it and to also get everything the server had been sent to the client to get the API response and then take over.
Got it. So say to continue our example, say we're on like a shop page and there's a product, I don't know, like ID in the query string when the page is loaded. How does the component figure out what to do with that?
Yeah, usually in the fetch function, you then say this.$router.query this.$route.query. So you get like the query parameters of the route. And then you say .item, if that's query parameter called item. And then you get that one. And in that fetch function, you then say, backend.example.com/item/ and then put in that ID and await that call so you get all the data. And then possibly also like prune it because you say you only want, I don't know, the quantity, title, and description, and you don't want everything else in the HTML as a big blob. So just want to get that. And eventually, just set that in the function as like this result equals the result.
Say you are a web page and you have all these products and stuff. Is there a way you can tell the server to go ahead and like fetch all of those pages ahead of time so we don't have to wait for a user to make that request?
Yeah, that's a bit difficult. Right now, I don't think. Because so what you can do is you can preload the JavaScript for other pages. So you basically say if you navigate from like a product page to say a product overview page to a list of products, you could say if that link to that product overview page is in the viewport and the browser is idle, so everything else has been loaded, then you can like preload the JavaScript. So that's also a feature of Nuxt called smart prefetching, also quite popular in other frameworks. So that's possible. But I think like really like more as preloading or caching results from server-side rendering, this will be possible in Nuxt 3. But in Nuxt 2, I think you would have to use something like beforehand, something maybe like a service function, a worker whatsoever, some caching solution like Varnish to do that. But it's not that easy there.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess I'm thinking to, so like at LogRocket we use Gatsby for our blog builds to like go pull all the WordPress data. Can you do something like that at all in Nuxt where you say like, okay, I know I've got like all of these pages I need to generate, go ahead and do the pre-generation, or does that like just not conceptually happen?
Yeah, so this is also quite interesting. You can provide, say, a list of all routes that should be pre-generated. That would work. Yeah. So if you have like say site generation, you can do this. What you can also do if you build your page very well, and we assume this happens, so every page is basically linked. So you have like no orphan pages where there's no link. Then you can just say, I don't have to put it anywhere because I have, say, at least one static route, which is the index page usually. And Nuxt has a built-in crawler. So that means it will pre-generate the index page. It will look for links and it will see, oh, these are also Nuxt pages. I have to pre-generate them too. So this will work without like providing any list of routes. You just have to be sure that they're all linked correctly together, but that's important anyway.
Right. Okay, cool. So yeah, that crawler method is interesting to me. So I guess the question that leads me to is in Gatsby, I feel like one of the cool things that has been very helpful to us is that we can do like smart incremental builds because we have this giant WordPress blog. If every time we publish, we had to do the whole thing, it takes 20 minutes to do a full clean build. Is there any kind of incremental build support?
So again, I have to tell Nuxt 3 will make that even better. But yes, so the cool thing is if you only change data and not the code, then you don't have to you don't have to run through the whole build process anymore. So Nuxt will have a way to say, oh, there basically we just check all the files in the folder. And if the checksum is the same one, then the cached version will just take the artifacts from there. And then you only have to generate the pages again with the data that's been present. But you at least skip a few minutes of the whole webpack process.
Got it.
But there's no way. So in theory, with a bit of manual setup, you can also say like, please just render this exact route. So by just saying, yeah, please render that. And this is possible, but it would be a bit of a workaround to get it working in Nuxt 2. In Nuxt 3, it will be nicer.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And again, like even in like if you're using Gatsby or something, if you change code on like the blog page, you're still going to have to re-render every blog.
Yeah, sure.
Get around that. So yeah, that totally makes sense. Cool. I guess kind of back to this, I feel like we're kind of on the fringes of it, and you touched on it earlier. But we were talking about plugins, or you mentioned plugins a little bit. Can you explain what or modules, plugins or modules, whatever what those are in the Nuxt space?
Yeah, so that's important because plugins and modules are not the same in Nuxt.
Okay, yeah. Good.
But so basically Nuxt modules, you can think of it as like an isolated piece of code that can do almost anything in Nuxt. So it can even like say Nuxt has specific so-called hooks, not to mix up with like React hooks or something, but just to say whenever Nuxt is doing something like generating a page, finishing generation, or like serving a page when running a server, you can hook into Nuxt and change the behavior. So say like, for example, there is a module called a sitemap module, and it will utilize a hook. So to say whenever the generation is finished, then like create a sitemap based on the pages you've generated. So modules can use these hooks to alter Nuxt behavior. They can also add plugins, and I'll come to a second what plugins are doing. They can do whatever they want, basically. They can even like change the CLI of Nuxt. So there's sky's the limit. And the cool part is, of course, you don't need much. They are basically NPM packages. You can install them, specify them, and they work out. And Nuxt plugins basically run once either on the server or on the client side, or if you want, even both. And they are usually being used by to like add Vue plugins or to like create services, to inject helper methods. So these are super common for those tasks. So say like you have a Google Analytics module, and it will use a plugin to enable the client to say like this.$GA for Google Analytics on or .off or .send event. So it will basically provide functionalities for the client or even for the server through the plugin.
Got it. So are modules something that like only run at build time? Is that accurate? Are they like injecting code?
So yes and no. So there is usually, or best practice is, if you can avoid, then yeah, only run the build time, don't run at runtime. Also due to like the whole size of the application for like serverless and cold start times and so on. But so mainly there is an option to say like build modules and then define all the things that only run at build time. But sometimes a module need to be there at runtime. So you can say, okay, we define this as a module that's just called modules and not build modules, and we'll go in there. Yeah. For example, like if it adds some kind of middleware or like server middleware from some custom endpoints or something, then it should be there on runtime too.
Got it. But like adding custom middleware, for example, wouldn't be a plugin typically. That'd be a module.
Yeah, so because middleware, yeah, it would be a module, and it would tell in the Nuxt config, say, okay, we will add this piece of middleware. Or there's also something called server middleware, which basically can act like as a small node app in Nuxt. So you can basically say, create a route call /ping, and whenever this happens, then just return with a response of 200 to enable easy health checks.
Oh,
so this would be some kind of server middleware, but this only works when a server is running. So it would have to be part of the modules because we're on runtime, and on side generation, it won't do anything because there's no server.
Got it. Cool. That makes sense. Yeah. So like say, I think the example you brought up was an RSS module that you were working on like initially. How does that, like say say you've got a site set up or using Nuxt and you wanted to add an RSS feed. How do you integrate with a module like an RSS module, for example?
Yeah, so first, it's called feed. So feed module, it can be RSS, JSON, whatever. They're, I think, 3 standards. Yeah, so what you can do is you can add that through like yarn, npm, whatever you like. And then in, say, build modules or modules, you define that you're using this one. And then you say, either in that definition, you can give like inline parameters, or you have like a special configuration key called feed. And then you can say, okay, I define, you can define as many feeds as you like. Say, I define a feed called feed XML. Okay. And then I have some kind of creation function that will basically, in the end, return the whole feed. Then like defining cache time, the type of the feed, and also data, if you like, if you have data already there. And in this creation function, basically you say, okay, I have a feed object, which is based on like an other npm package for like managing all these feeds. That's way better than like me writing a small little version of that. Then I can say like, okay, I give like the feed a title, a link, description, and then I can even do like data fetching in there. So I say like it's an async function. I can do like Axios calls or fetch or whatever, and I say get all the posts from my blog, from my API, and then for each item just add that to the feed item, and all good.
Nice, very cool. Yeah, I think that all makes sense to me, and I think thank you for painting such a clear picture. Like I kind of I understand this ecosystem a lot better now.
Awesome, that's to hear. I hope our listeners will too.
yeah, for sure. Cool. I guess with that, I'm kind of curious about V3 and what you guys have been working on there. So what prompted it? I mean, obviously, like Vue 3 is probably the answer there, but like what else were you motivated to get in there? And what's new and exciting?
Yeah, so of course, Vue 3 is a huge factor. Also like Webpack 5, that Vite is now existing. So there are a couple of things that really, I would say like changed and brought the ecosystem forward. So the main point, there were a few refactors that were, long awaited anyway. So these need a new breaking change and major version anyway. And then, there were a few things that will be necessary to make Nuxt even better. So one thing that's happening in V3 is like we get the core even leaner by like extracting lots of functionalities into own isolated npm packages. Basically by just saying, okay, say there's a package called UFO that's basically there to handle all kind of URLs and paths, mainly URLs, to say like, okay, remove the query, just strip something else, or add a trading slash or not. So Nuxt had such utilities and still has it in V2, but the idea is to make it at first reusable, so it doesn't have to be Nuxt that uses that. And also to not have this as part of the core to make it easier testable. Because testing these utilities in Nuxt is possible, but for some utilities, they are too coupled to actual Nuxt. So the idea is to like decouple them, bring them on packages, make them easier to test, and also to reuse in even own projects, but also like other frameworks if they like to. And then the other pain point, so to say, was like the whole topic of serverless rendering. So this is possible for Nuxt, but as I said, it's not that straightforward. So the idea was to like create a new server engine, and this will the idea is to cover almost all deployment possibilities you have. That means like classic deployments, static site generation, server side rendering as well, which is important, but also deploying on serverless, so like Azure, AWS, whatsoever. But also, and this is another challenge, deploying on workers, so on non-node environments. So like Cloudflare workers or Netlify, I think edge handlers they're called. They don't have V8, so they have V8 isolates and not Node.js environments. So you have to like mock a few things out here and there to make all it work. So yeah, a couple of things that besides like Vue 3 and the composition API that drove Nuxt in the direction of, okay, we need a new major version. We can clean things up. We can split things out. We can make things better and easier testable, but nice. Also like improving internals.
Gotcha. Nice. Very cool. Yeah. So I guess, but my first question is on Bundler. You mentioned Vite. Is that the default now, or is like you have to kind of configure your build step when you set up a new project?
So yeah, by default, Vite is used, right? Mm-hmm. As a dev server. But the cool thing is you can always switch between Vite and Webpack. Sure. And there's also that's crazy what all these amazing people did. Like there's now something called Unbuild, which is a package. And it is basically a unified JavaScript build system. So you basically build a way together with Unplugin, which is another option, to like create plugins that are usable for like Rollup and Vite and Webpack and the S build for the same time. So ideally, you create something and Unplugin together with like Unbuild for the build phase will be the reason that it works almost everywhere. So you don't have to think about like, okay, for Webpack, I have to do this extra, or Vite do this and this extra. This always reminds me of back in times jQuery, where we have like, okay, this browser is doing it differently, and we have another thing implemented here. And jQuery is like, yeah, we take all what you do and uniform it. And the same idea is behind like Unplugin, where you say like Vite is doing differently, Rollup, Webpack, YesBuild, all together, same interface, same API, and it just works.
Nice. So are you saying that is useful even if you're just deploying like a web app, having a site, because then you just have to define the config once, or is that mainly for like if you're working on modules?
So ideally, or I mean, it depends a bit on what you're doing. But if you say like, I want to create a plugin that will work for, say, any bundler, then you surely can use Unplugin. Right now, it's commonly used in the Nuxt ecosystem, but that's the reason why it's a separate package. I can think of it being used wherever. So that would totally make sense if you go in all the way deep down and like creating on that lower level.
Sorry, yes, I'm catching up still. I'm still wrapping my head around, this space where we're like thinking about multiple bundlers now instead of just
it's good.
Crazy. It's a good change. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also super interesting. Like, I mean, Rollup was there before and was mainly used for libraries, and Webpack was mainly used for like the end application. But now also with like Vite, and another pain point is like the whole ESM topic, like switching from CJS to ESM only and libraries not having. So this is also something that Vite pushed forward, and Nuxt is also pushing forward to say like, okay, ESM only, which means some dependencies can't be used anymore. So is there a workaround? Is there so there are like interoperability things that can help. But sometimes this also leads to like breaking stuff. And that's why also Nuxt, one of the reasons why Nuxt is also better to like tweak things, find out ways to improve stuff and to give the best developer experience possible.
Yeah, nice. So like say that there were somebody's starting a new project and they want to use Nuxt. Would you recommend that they just jump into 3, or would you say probably stick with 2 for now?
I mean, it depends a bit on what they're trying to achieve. Nuxt 3 is taking shape. I think the main issue, what keeps me personally from like doing productive things besides not production ready, is that most modules are not being ported over yet. So I personally haven't ported my modules over there too, mainly because static site generation is not yet implemented, because there's still some architectural works to make this hybrid rendering or ISR and so on, so incremental static regeneration work. So that's what's still holding. And the other point is that now that there is like something called Nuxt Kit, which is more or less a nice way for like all module authors to define a uniform surface and uniform, like, say, a contract for modules. So you have like options, say there's the name, there's the version, you have compatibilities, you have a dedicated way to write things. Before it was just a function, which means more freedom, but also less structure and so on. But the main point is like testing these modules right now. There is a new test runner called Vite. So another new cool thing that's also being used as a test runner for modules soon. And there's also utility in the work that will be work with like Nuxt or Nuxt, which is the CLI test. But yeah, that's still work in progress. So right now I don't want to port my modules over without testing them properly, and right now I can't test them due to this part being missing. So I'm still waiting, but then I will port things over and coming really back to your question, answer them. If you want to play around and if you don't rely on modules, then just go ahead, because there's nothing that keeps you. But if you say like, oh, I want to bring a thing in production in like a week or two, then Nuxt 2 is a good option. And you still get lots of goodies like the composition API from Vue 3 through Nuxt modules. So you can still do that and still leverage most of Nuxt modules.
Nice. Very cool. So somebody's like more just kind of exploring and wants to play with stuff. 3 might be where to go ahead and start, because you're probably not going to need to pull a bunch of stuff. But yeah, if you're going to need like to integrate with a bunch of services, and like it'd be handy to have a ecosystem 2 might be a better bet for now.
Absolutely. And as I said, you can always like try like paving a path for migrating by just saying, okay, I still use the composition API through a module that's still available in Vue 2, even though it had been introduced in Vue 3. So that's I think that's a good way too, because like I personally I really love using the composition API, and I don't want to miss it on Nuxt 2 either. So that's a good part too.
Right, totally. Yes, like say your goal was you wanted to build some crazy fast site and you like wanted to deploy it at the edge so it can like run in workers and everything. Is that pretty, like, is that working in 3, or is it close? Or
so you can deploy in Cloudflare workers already in 3. You can, in theory, you can even do this in Nuxt 2. Like, so I did this for a Nuxt 2 project as well. Because this new server engine called Nuxt Nitro is also pluggable into Nuxt 2, but cool. Ideally you just go for free.
Nice. Yeah, very cool. Awesome. Yeah, no, I want to go check out V3 now. So yeah, I used Nuxt a long time ago, like when I was spending more time spinning up new Vue projects, and I had a big one. But yeah, it's been a long time, so it's exciting hearing about all this new stuff. I want to go check it out.
I think from the community, I have the mixed feeling, because it now takes a while. Vue 3 is like out for more than a year now, and I understand that, but there's like lots of internal work to get things done. Plus, we don't want to push another version like in a half a year, say, oh, there's Nuxt 4 now, because we had to do lots of things that we just waited for. So right now is a change, and it takes a bit, and also we try to have a clear migration path at some point. But I would say like for everyone waiting for like a release candidate, this it will be available in March, so that's a plan. But of course, like ecosystem catching up, we saw it with Vue 2 to Vue 3. It always takes a little bit of time, but we try our best to make it as short as possible and also give like clear guidance.
Nice. Yeah, I guess on that note, I feel like it's been a little bit slower on the uptick for Vue 3 across the board, I think, than anyone anticipated. Like a lot of the popular front-end library or just like module component libraries have taken a lot longer time to get rolling. But I feel like we're kind of getting there now. Like everything's kind of catching up. We're on the precipice here.
I hope so. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Like more adoption, because I think Vue 3, even though there was this whole, I don't want to say drama, but about like, oh, there's a new API and we want to remove the options API, and no, it's all good, which was just, I think, just a little bit of miscommunication in the end, which could have happened to anyone. But I think like the step and the direction is good, and also like the developer experience will be improved no matter what you use. No matter if you use JavaScript or TypeScript, it doesn't matter. Now Vue plus TypeScript is amazing. I don't like Vue 2 plus TypeScript due to me being forced like having this magic this everywhere, and then either using like the class component approach. Not my jam. But with composition API, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So
it feels much more natural, like to just have the type system there.
And also like I think Vue with the composition API feels more like just JavaScript, so to say. It's such an common term saying, oh, yeah, this is just JavaScript. And now it feels less magical. But of course, like if you start and only learn composition API, I think it's tougher. So like when I personally explain people what Vue is, I always start like, okay, this is the option API. We'll do all the things that are available there. And then we will take a look at composition API. Mainly because people learning Vue now will definitely need the options API. There's so many so much content, so many guides, videos about Vue 2 and patterns. They will have to understand it. So right now there's no way around it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, when we had Evan on, I asked him this question specifically. I was like, I feel like documentation is hard when you're making such a big shift like this, and it's like, we're aware of it, and it's a thing. But yeah, I agree. The old way isn't going anywhere anytime soon, just because there's so much content there.
Yeah, but like right now, have you seen the new Vue.js documentation? Like it had been released.
It's good. Yeah,
it's amazing. Like I was like, wow.
yeah. There's definitely a lot of effort going in. Like that problem is being thought about for sure.
Absolutely. And like when I started with Vue, I always felt like documentation was already top notch. But I think right now they really adapted to the whole situation with 2 different APIs and giving code examples for everything and being more clear. Like I have another friend who like came from Angular and now learning Vue and was like, oh, composition API, having tough time understanding. It's like, oh yeah, look at the staging docs. And they were like, oh yeah, wow, that's way better.
Yeah, so exactly. Yeah, cool. I guess, is there any, other than that, is there anything else kind of in the Vue ecosystem or even in like the web dev ecosystem in general that you're really excited about that's coming?
Yes. I mean, yeah, as I said, adoption of Vue 3, sure, tick. But I think like in the web development in general, I really hope to have conferences again. Like I'm really missing like seeing people around the world. Like usually it's like, okay, Vue conference or general web dev conferences, even like meetups, local town, just seeing people, getting in touch with them. It's different to like being online, and it's better than nothing, but still like that would be amazing to to feel again, to meet people. Yeah, and I mean, besides that, I think like Vite is still something to look at, and also I'm super curious where this is going. And like on a broader perspective, the whole topic about at first like using Rust more and more for JavaScript tooling, which is happening to speed things up, so it will be super interesting. And I think also about like reducing the overhead of server-side rendering, more or less doing less hydration. So hydration, just to explain that, is basically the scenario when the server sends the HTML over, and then like Vue or any other framework kicks in, and Vue could now just say, okay, scrap whatever the server sent. I will just rebuild on my own, or it will go through everything the server sent and then says, oh yeah, okay, I will basically match that to my own representation. So in Vue case, it's like virtual DOM representation. And this takes a bit of time, especially with like static content. Vue could also just say like, oh yeah, the static, I know this because when the Vue compiler compiled the Vue single file components, it hinted, oh, this is static. I don't have to hydrate this because it won't be changed. And like having more of these improvements, maybe even to some part of like partial hydration. So like, yeah, ignore large static part of the site will really improve the performance. Yeah. So this is something I really look forward to, and also like more investigation in this direction.
Yeah. I feel like we're kind of in this era now. Everyone's thinking about performance just way more. Like for a while, I think it was like all about the dev experience, and now it's kind of like, okay, we gotta make the web snappy,
perform it again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Like it's crazy if you think about like how much JavaScript is being shipped for almost no reason. So performance is also like one of the topics I always try to take care, no matter what it is. Especially if you like have SEO concerns, you always need really good performance and KPIs for like classic web applications behind authentication. People are always like, if it loads a second longer, I don't mind. People will use it anyway. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it matters. It matters. I start looking at like the user fall off charts, and it's like time is money, man. Like it's real. Yeah. So
I'm super looking forward to that. And actually, I am right now. I'm writing a thesis on this topics on server-side rendering, and also maybe there will be some interesting outcomes
in your spare time.
So in theory, my full-time job is being a student. But yeah, in theory, so I hope I can finish it this year or so. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, Alex, thank you so much for joining us. Is there any links or anything you want to point our listeners to? We'll include them to the show notes, but
so I think mainly if you have any more questions, then of course, I think the Twitter profile is the best way to just shoot me DM over or just tweet me, like just add me. And for like more in-depth technical posts, and I hope I'll write more this year, there is also my blog. So a couple of cool posts there. And I think that's it. If there are more questions, then just add me.
Awesome. Alex, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll see you around.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Have a good one.